The sun had barely risen over the horizon when John found himself deep in the dense woods of the north. It had been a quiet morning, with only the sound of birds chirping and the gentle rustle of leaves. He was on a routine hike, one he had done many times before, but today felt different. The air seemed heavier, charged with an unsettling energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. John had always been a lover of nature, his work as an environmental researcher keeping him close to the wild. He appreciated the beauty of the untouched forests, the way the sunlight danced through the trees, and the sense of peace they brought him. But today, something was off. As he walked through the underbrush, John noticed an unusual silence settling over the forest. The birds had stopped singing. The wind, which usually whispered through the trees, was still. It was as though the entire forest was holding its breath. He frowned, his instincts kicking in. He had learned long ago to trust his gut, and right. Now something didn't feel right. Suddenly, he heard a faint rustling sound, coming from the thick bushes ahead. He stopped in his tracks, his heart racing. Slowly, he crouched down, trying to make himself as small as possible. His eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement. Then, out of nowhere, a small, terrified figure darted across his path. It was a baby fox, no older than a few weeks, its fur bright orange and fluffy. It looked up at him with wide, panicked eyes, as if it was pleading for help. Before John could react, a loud growl pierced the silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. John's heart skipped a beat. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble as a massive creature emerged from the trees. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity, and its fur shimmered like molten gold. It wasn't just any animal, it was something far beyond the creatures he had seen in the forest before. The air around it hummed with power. The fox cub, sensing the danger, darted to the side, trying to escape. But the creature was too fast. With a single swipe of its claw, it knocked the cub to the ground, pinning it under its massive paw. John's eyes widened in horror. He had never seen anything like this before. The creature wasn't just a predator. It was something more. Something that didn't belong to this world. Without thinking, John sprang into action. He charged forward, hoping to distract the creature long enough for the cub to escape. His heart was pounding in his chest as he ran, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had no idea what he was dealing with, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let this innocent animal die. The creature turned its head, its glowing eyes locking onto John's. There was a moment of silence, as if the world itself had paused. Then, with a growl that shook the very ground beneath him, the creature released the cub and lunged at John. But just as it was about to strike, something unexpected happened. A sudden flash of light erupted from the trees, blinding John for a moment. When he blinked, trying to clear his vision, he saw the creature recoil in pain, letting out a deafening roar. It staggered back, its glowing eyes flickering, as if something had disrupted its hold on reality. A figure appeared from the shadows, moving with a speed and grace that seemed impossible for any human. She was tall, with glowing, fox-like ears and eyes that shimmered with the same light as the creature. Her body seemed to radiate an otherworldly energy, her skin glowing faintly in the dim light of the forest. The creature seemed to recognize her. It snarled, its fur bristling, but it didn't attack. Instead, it backed away, retreating into the shadows as the figure stepped forward. She knelt beside the fox cub, gently cradling it in her arms. John stood frozen, his mind racing. He had no idea what was happening. The figure in front of him was not human. There was something alien about her, something that sent a chill down his spine. She looked up at him, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him feel as if she could see into his very soul. "You have saved my child," she said, her voice smooth and melodic, but with an undeniable power behind it. "For that, you have earned a place among us." John's mind struggled to process the words. What was she saying? Who was she? And what had he just witnessed? He opened his mouth to ask, but before he could speak, she stood and turned her attention back to the cub, her hand gently stroking its fur. "You will come with me," she said. "And you will become part of our family. We have much to discuss." As she spoke, John's heart raced with a mix of fear and curiosity. Who was this woman? And what was her connection to the creature he had just encountered? More importantly, why had she saved him and the cub? John had no answers, but one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. John's mind raced as the mysterious woman cradled the fox cub in her arms. Her gaze was intense, filled with an almost unnerving calmness, but there was no mistaking the power she exuded. Everything about her alien features, her glowing skin, the strange energy surrounding her, left him on edge. He had no idea what kind of creature she was, but one thing was certain. She wasn't human. He wanted to speak, to ask a million questions, but his voice failed him. Instead, he watched in awe as she gently stroked the cub. Her touch so tender, it was almost as if the fox cub was her child, her real child. The cub, now calm, nuzzled into her chest, its wide eyes slowly closing as it relaxed in her arms. "I am not from your world," she said softly, her voice still melodic but with an edge of authority. "And the creature you saw earlier is no ordinary animal. It is a guardian of our realm, but we are no longer safe from the forces that seek to destroy us." John blinked, trying to absorb what she was saying. She wasn't from his world. Guardian. The words echoed in his mind, but they made no sense. Who were these beings? And why had they appeared here, in this forest? The woman seemed to sense his confusion. "You've stepped into something greater than you realize," she continued. "The war between our kind and the invaders has already begun, but you can still help." John's chest tightened. "Help? How?" The words slipped from his lips. Before he could stop it, he couldn't believe he was asking this stranger for help. Yet something in her presence made him feel as though he had no choice. She stood, cradling the fox cub carefully. Her eyes never left his. "You saved my child. For that, you have been chosen. Our people do not extend such offers lightly. You have a bond with us now, and this bond, it is your responsibility." John shook his head. "I'm not part of any war. I'm just a scientist, a hiker. This is all too much. I don't understand." The woman's gaze softened for a brief moment. "I do not expect you to understand right away, but you will, soon." John's thoughts spun. How could he help? He was just a normal person. How could he possibly be part of something so extraordinary? "I know you have many questions," she said, as though reading his thoughts, "and I will answer them. But not here. Not now." She turned, her fox-like ears twitching as she listened for something in the distance. "There is not much time. The creature you saw earlier is only the beginning. It is only a scout. They are coming, John, and we are outnumbered." Without another word, the woman began walking deeper into the forest, the cub still held close to her chest. John felt his legs move instinctively, following her, though his mind was still trying to catch up with everything that was happening. As they walked, the world around them began to change. The trees, once towering and wild, now seemed to bend toward the woman, as if they were alive and responding to her presence. The forest didn't just feel like a place anymore. It felt like a living, breathing entity, aware of everything around. John could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't just the forest that was shifting, it was the very fabric of reality itself. He had heard of strange phenomena before, but he had never experienced anything like this. The ground beneath him hummed faintly, and every so often, he thought he saw flickers of light darting between the trees like flashes of something otherworldly. "You feel it, don't you?" the woman asked, her voice quiet but insistent. She stopped walking and turned to face him. The shift in the world, The veil between our worlds is thinning. John nodded, though he wasn't sure if he truly understood. What do you mean by the veil? The veil is the barrier between your world and mine. It has kept us apart for centuries. But now, the invaders are breaking it down. They want to conquer everything, our world, your world, everything in between. She paused, her eyes glowing faintly. They will stop at nothing to destroy us. John felt a shiver crawl down his spine. The thought of a war between worlds was impossible to comprehend. And yet, the evidence was standing in front of him, the woman, the cub, the guardian creature, and now the strange energy that seemed to pulse. Through the forest, the woman continued, her voice taking on a solemn tone. The war will not be won with strength alone. We need someone who understands your world, someone who can help us find a way to bridge the gap between us. We need you, John. You are the key to our survival. John froze in place. Me? I don't know how I can help. I'm just a regular person. I don't have any special skills. I don't even know where to begin. The woman looked at him with a mixture of sadness and understanding. You have more power within you than you realize. It is not the physical strength that matters, but the strength of your heart, your willingness to stand against the darkness. She stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. You have already made your choice, John. Now you must come with us. We cannot wait any longer. The invasion is starting. John took a deep breath, his mind racing. Everything he thought he knew was slipping away. He was being thrust into something far beyond his understanding, but deep down, he felt it an undeniable pull to follow her, to be part of this strange world. He didn't know what awaited him, but one thing was clear. He couldn't turn back now. The war had already begun. John walked in stunned silence, trying to process everything the woman had said. The forest around them seemed to grow more vibrant, almost alive with energy. It was as if the very trees were aware of his presence, bending toward him as though trying to communicate something only they could understand. His senses were overwhelmed. The sounds of distant birds were muted, replaced by a quiet hum that seemed to vibrate in his chest. He felt as if the ground itself was alive, pulsating with energy. He glanced over at the woman, who led the way with a steady grace. Her movements were fluid, almost ethereal, as if she were part of the very forest she moved through. The fox cub in her arms appeared calm, its eyes half closed as it snuggled into her warmth. The woman seemed to radiate an aura of peace, yet there was something dangerous lurking behind her composed expression. She wasn't just a being from another world, she was part of something ancient, something beyond human comprehension. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing in the forest. The trees parted in a perfect circle, revealing a strange structure at the center. It was unlike anything John had ever seen. The building seemed to grow out of the earth itself, made of twisted vines, stone, and shimmering crystals that caught the faint light of the morning sun. It looked ancient, yet strangely modern, like a fusion of nature and technology. This is where we make our stand, the woman said, her voice steady and commanding. Our sanctuary. John stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, staring at the structure in awe. The sense of power radiating from it was palpable. It wasn't just a building. It felt like a living entity, as if it were part of the forest itself. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Everything here seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't understand, but he couldn't deny its presence. The woman turned to face him, her glowing eyes locking onto his. This is where we will prepare for the battle ahead. Our people are already assembling, but they need your help. Help? John repeated, his voice sounding strained. I don't know what I can do. I'm just a normal guy. The woman smiled faintly, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. You are much more than that, John. The bond you share with us is rare, and it is no accident that you found us today. Your world has prepared you in ways you do not yet understand, but the time to learn is now." Before he could respond, the ground trembled beneath them. It wasn't just a slight shake, it was a deep rumble, like the earth itself was warning them. The woman's eyes narrowed and her ears twitched. She turned quickly, her gaze scanning the surrounding woods. "We don't have much time," she said urgently. "They're coming." John's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea what was going on, but it was clear that whatever was happening, it wasn't good. The woman began walking toward the structure, her pace quickening. John hesitated for a moment, his feet feeling heavy, but something inside him urged him forward. He followed her, the unease in his chest growing with each step. Inside the structure, the air was thick with energy. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, glowing softly as though alive. The space was circular, and in the center stood a raised platform, adorned with more of the shimmering crystals. On the far side of the room, a group of beings similar to the woman, though their features varied, were gathered. They all turned as she entered, their eyes filled with silent respect. "This is John," the woman announced, her voice steady. "He will help us in the coming battle." The others regarded John with curiosity, their eyes scanning him as if assessing his worth. Some looked wary, others with more warmth, but there was no mistaking the weight of the moment. These beings, whatever they were about to fight for their survival. And now John was part of it. One of the beings stepped forward, a tall figure with silver skin and glowing markings on their arms. Their voice was calm, but John could hear the edge of urgency in it. "We are running out of time. The invaders are closing in. We must prepare." John's mind raced. The invaders. He had heard the woman mention them, but what exactly were they? Who were these beings, and why had they come to Earth? And why had they chosen him to help them? The woman turned back to John, her expression softening. "I know you have questions. You will have your answers, but not yet. First, you must understand the gravity of the situation. These invaders are no ordinary enemies. They are a force of destruction, unlike anything your world has ever seen. They seek to conquer and erase everything in their path." She paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. "They are not from your world, John. They are from the same place as us, but they are driven by power, greed, and a desire to control. They have been hunting our kind for centuries, and now they have turned their eyes toward your world. It is a war of survival for both of us." John could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. The magnitude of what she was saying was almost too much to comprehend. But there was no denying it. Whatever was happening, it was real. And he was in the middle of it. The woman placed the fox cub gently onto the platform, where it curled up, its eyes closed in peaceful slumber. She looked back at John, her gaze steady. "Now you must learn. You must understand what you are up against. And you must prepare for what is coming." John nodded slowly, his mind still reeling. He didn't know how he could help, but one thing was clear: the fate of both their worlds rested on his next move. John stood motionless in the glowing chamber, surrounded by beings whose very presence seemed to hum with energy. The words the woman had spoken were still ringing in his ears. "The invaders are coming. You are part of this now." He had no idea what he had gotten himself into, but he knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back. He glanced around the room, taking in the strange, alien architecture. The walls shimmered with the same light as the woman's skin, and the symbols etched into the surface seemed to pulse with a rhythm all their own. The air was thick with anticipation. The beings who had once seemed so distant and mysterious now felt like real living creatures, beings with purpose, driven by the same fear and determination. John was starting to feel himself. The woman, who still hadn't told him her name, turned to face him once more. Her glowing eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, John felt as though she could read every thought in his mind. But there was no time for hesitation. She stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "You must prepare. There is no time to waste. The invaders will not wait for us to be ready." John swallowed hard. "Prepare for what? I'm not a fighter. I don't know how to do this." She smiled faintly, though it was clear her patience was running thin. "You do not need to fight in the way you think. The power you need is already within you. It is just waiting to be unlocked." John shook his head. "What do you mean? I'm just a normal person. I can't suddenly become someone who can stop an invasion." She took a deep breath, as though trying to find the right words. "You are more than you realize. There is a connection between us, the beings of my kind and yours. We are not entirely different, John, and because you helped my child, you have proven that you are capable of something far greater than you understand." John frowned, his thoughts spinning. He had always prided himself on being logical, practical. But this was something else entirely. An invasion, aliens, a connection he couldn't see or feel. None of it made sense. Without waiting for him to respond, the woman motioned toward the raised platform where the fox cub lay. As she did, a group of the other beings stepped forward, their faces filled with a quiet urgency. One of them, a tall figure with blue skin and intricate markings across their arms, spoke. "We have been trained for this battle for centuries. But it is not just strength we rely on. It is the bond between us all. The energy that flows through us is not just physical. It is mental, spiritual. It connects all things." John's mind swirled with confusion. Energy, spiritual connection? What are you talking about? The woman stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You will understand soon enough, but for now you must train. The invaders will use their own powers to try to manipulate and control. You must learn how to shield yourself from that influence, to harness the energy of your mind and soul. Only then can you protect yourself and us." She moved toward a stone altar in the center of the room, where glowing symbols began to appear as she approached. "It will begin with the mind, John. You must learn to control it, to focus it. Only then can the energy within you be awakened." John hesitated, his heart pounding. This was not what he had signed up for. He had never asked for any of this. He was a researcher, not a warrior. But the seriousness in the woman's eyes left him no choice. He had already stepped into a world he couldn't understand, and now he was being asked to prepare for something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. The woman turned to the other beings. "Let the training begin." One of the beings, a woman with golden eyes and pale lavender skin, stepped forward and held out her hand toward John. "Focus, John. Feel the energy around you. It is everywhere, all the time. All you need to do is reach out and take it." John took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. This was insane. He was about to attempt something he couldn't even begin to comprehend. But the woman's gaze was unwavering, and he could see the sincerity in her eyes. They weren't asking him to fight. They were asking him to believe. He closed his eyes and focused, trying to shut out the noise in his mind. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he could feel something almost imperceptible, brush against his awareness. It wasn't physical, yet it felt real. A faint humming energy that seemed to vibrate just beneath the surface of his consciousness. He reached out toward it, his mind almost instinctively connecting with it. A sudden rush of warmth flooded his body. His chest tightened, and he gasped as the energy swirled around him. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. His thoughts scattered, and he struggled to hold on to the connection. He felt like he was on the verge of something, but it kept slipping through his fingers. "Focus," the woman's voice came again, steady and calm. "Feel it, but do not force it." John swallowed hard, concentrating harder. Slowly, the energy seemed to settle, like a current flowing gently through him. He could feel it now, not just around him, but within him. It was as if a part of him had awakened, something deep inside that he had never known existed. The warmth began to build, spreading through his limbs, and for a brief moment, He felt stronger than he had ever felt before. His thoughts cleared, and for the first time, he felt a strange sense of power rising within him. It wasn't his own, yet it felt intimately connected to him, like a force that had always been waiting to be used. The woman nodded approvingly. Good. Now you must learn to control it. The energy will be your weapon, but it will also be your shield. Use it wisely. John opened his eyes, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He wasn't sure what had just happened, but he felt different, as though a door had been opened in his mind, revealing a power he had never known he had. You are not alone in this, John, the woman said. We will help you harness this power. Together, we will face the invaders, but first, you must learn control. And that will take time. John nodded, though he still had no idea what he had just experienced. But there was one thing he was sure of now. His world was no longer just a place of science and reason. It had become something far greater, and he was about to be a part of it. The training had just begun. And so had his transformation. The days passed quickly, each one blending into the next as John began to adapt to his new life. Every moment was filled with lessons, mental, physical, and spiritual, as the woman and her people trained him to harness the strange, powerful energy he had tapped into. They weren't just preparing him to fight. They were preparing him to understand the very nature of the battle that was coming. A battle that would determine the fate of both their worlds. It wasn't easy. The energy was elusive, like trying to hold water in his hands. It would slip away just as he thought he had it under control. His mind often felt scattered, and there were moments when frustration would grip him. But every time he felt like giving up, the woman would appear, her calm demeanor grounding him and pushing him to continue. You must not fear the power within you, she would say. It is not something to control with force. It is something to understand, to allow. Only then will you wield it as it was meant to be. And so he continued, learning to meditate and focus, to listen to the hum of energy around him. Slowly, he began to feel more attuned to the strange force. His senses sharpened. His awareness stretched further than he ever thought possible, and his connection to the beings around him deepened. They were all in this together, and somehow, he felt he was starting to belong. But despite his progress, John couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. The invaders had been spoken of often in hushed tones. The woman had explained their threat, how they were a ruthless force from another world, driven by a desire for domination and control. They had been targeting the woman's people for centuries, eradicating entire civilizations in their quest for power. But every time John asked about them directly, who they were, where they came from, and what their ultimate goal was, she would only say one thing: you will see them soon enough. John couldn't help but wonder what was so terrible about these invaders. Were they really as unstoppable as she had said? Or was there something more to this story that they hadn't shared with him? The curiosity gnawed at him, but he was too focused on his training to question it further. He had a role to play, and he needed to be ready. One morning, as John sat in a quiet meditation chamber, attempting to center himself, a sudden sharp tremor shook the ground beneath him. His eyes snapped open, and he immediately stood, heart racing. The vibrations were unmistakable. This was no ordinary tremor. Something was wrong. In the distance, a loud, eerie howl echoed through the forest. It was a sound that sent a chill down John's spine, a primal scream that seemed to shake the very trees. It was as if the forest itself was warning them of something terrible. He felt the hairs on his neck stand up. The woman appeared at the entrance of the chamber, her face grim. It has begun. John didn't need to ask what she meant. The look in her eyes was enough to tell him that the invaders were closer than they had ever been before. He followed her outside, where the others were already assembling, their faces filled with determination. The clearing, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now seemed like a battleground. The air was thick with tension. As They gathered in the clearing. The woman turned to John. "It is time," she said, her voice steady but filled with an underlying urgency. "We will show you who the invaders are and what they are capable of. You must understand the full scope of the threat." The ground trembled again, this time stronger, sending a ripple through the forest. From the depths of the trees, figures began to emerge. At first, they were silhouettes, barely visible in the dim light. But as they drew closer, John's heart skipped a beat. They were like nothing he had ever seen before. Tall humanoid creatures with dark, glossy skin that seemed to absorb the light around them. Their eyes glowed an unnatural shade of red, and their bodies were covered in strange armor-like plating, sleek and reflective. Their movements were fluid, almost predatory, as they approached the clearing with a menacing confidence. John's throat went dry as he looked at them. These were the invaders, the beings who had been hunting the woman's people for centuries. They were terrifying. But there was something else in their eyes, something that made his stomach twist with dread. They were calculating, cold, unfeeling. One of the invaders stepped forward, its glowing red eyes locking onto the woman. There was a moment of silence, the tension thick in the air. The woman stood her ground, unflinching, though John could see the tension in her posture. "You know why we are here," the invader spoke, its voice like a cold whisper, sending shivers down John's spine. "You have been a thorn in our side for too long. Your world will fall, just like all the others before it." The woman's eyes narrowed. "We will not let you take it." The invader chuckled, a low, guttural sound that sent a chill through the group. "You are powerless against us. You always have been. Your connection to this world is a weakness. We will crush you, just as we have crushed every other civilization that stood in our way." John's heart raced. The invaders were stronger than he had imagined. They were not just ruthless, they were certain of their victory. But the woman's voice cut through the tension, filled with an unexpected strength. "We have a power you do not understand, and we will fight with everything we have to protect this world." The invader's expression faltered for a brief moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing its face. But then, just as quickly, it sneered. "We shall see." With a swift movement, it raised its arm, and in an instant, a surge of energy crackled in the air. The ground beneath their feet shuddered as the invader unleashed a wave of destructive force, sending shockwaves through the forest. The woman reacted in an instant, her eyes glowing brightly. She raised her hands, and a barrier of shimmering light appeared in front of her, absorbing the energy with an almost unnatural ease. The ground beneath her feet cracked, but she remained standing, her face a picture of determination. The invaders' eyes widened slightly in surprise, but it didn't hesitate. It raised its other arm, preparing for another attack. John's mind raced. He had seen what they were capable of. He had felt the power within him. Now it was time to act. "Now, John!" the woman shouted. He didn't know what she meant, but in that moment, everything clicked. He could feel the energy surging within him stronger than ever before. His mind focused on the invader, on the threat it posed. Without thinking, he reached out, trying to harness the energy that had once felt so foreign to him. He felt the power rush through his body, a wave of raw force that seemed to connect him to everything around him. His hands raised instinctively, and a blast of energy shot from his palms, hitting the invader square in the chest. The impact was immediate. There was a bright flash of light, followed by a shockwave that sent John stumbling back. The invader recoiled, its armor scorched, its eyes wide with shock. John's breath came in ragged gasps, his body shaking with the aftereffects of the blast. He couldn't believe what had just happened. Had he actually done that? The woman's voice broke through his thoughts. "Well done, John. You've just begun to understand." But the battle was far from over. The ground was shaking. The air was thick with the energy of the confrontation that was unfolding in the clearing. John stood there, panting heavily, his chest rising and falling as he struggled to comprehend what had just happened. The blast of energy he had unleashed had struck the invader, but it hadn't taken it down. No, the invader had merely staggered back, its armor scorched, but its presence still looming over them like an unstoppable force. He looked around, trying to catch his breath, but the invaders weren't done yet. They were preparing for another assault, and this time, John could feel it. He was the target. The woman stepped forward, her eyes glowing brighter than ever, and she stood between the invaders and the others. The other beings around her took their positions, standing ready to protect, their eyes filled with quiet resolve. There was no fear in their gaze, only determination. "You have awakened something you do not understand," the invader who had spoken earlier sneered, wiping away the scorch marks on its chest. "You are not a threat. You are nothing compared to us. You're playing in forces beyond your control." The woman's voice cut through the tension, her tone firm and unwavering. "We may not be a threat to you yet, but you will learn. You will learn that we do not surrender. Not now, not ever." The invader's eyes narrowed. "You're more foolish than I thought. You cannot stop what is coming." John felt the surge of energy once again, not just around him, but within him. It was like the very fabric of his being was aligned with the world he had stepped into. He had trained, struggled, and fought with his own mind and soul, but now, in the face of the invader's unrelenting power, he felt something deeper awakening inside him. "John," the woman called, her voice full of urgency. "Now is the time. Focus. Everything you have trained for is about to be tested." He could feel the weight of her words, the significance of this moment pressing down on him. The battle wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about everything, the future of both their worlds, the lives of his new friends, the fate of everything that had become so important to him in such a short time. John closed his eyes for a moment, grounding himself in the present. He reached deep within, feeling that power, that energy, coursing through his veins. It was more than just energy. It was a connection to the earth itself, to the beings around him, and to the very fabric of the universe. He realized then that this was not just a fight against the invaders. It was a fight for balance, for the preservation of all that was pure and beautiful in the worlds they inhabited. He opened his eyes and focused on the invader before him, the one who had spoken with such disdain, with such certainty that they would win. The invader was preparing its next strike, its hands crackling with destructive energy, but John wasn't afraid. He had no time for fear anymore. The woman stepped back, nodding once in approval as she recognized what was happening. She understood what he was doing. He wasn't just defending himself. He was tapping into the very core of what made him human. And that, as she had told him, was his greatest strength. John raised his hands, his body steady as the energy flowed through him. He could feel the power building, growing stronger with every second. The invader's eyes widened slightly, sensing the shift, but it was too late. John wasn't going to wait for the invader to make the first move this time. He thrust his hands forward, and the world seemed to explode. The energy burst from him in a blinding flash, slamming into the invader with the force of 1,000 storms. The sheer intensity of it sent a shockwave through the clearing, knocking back the invader and sending it sprawling to the ground. The invader howled, its armor cracking and splitting under the pressure, its body convulsing with the raw power that John had unleashed. John felt his body tremble, but he held firm, focusing on the energy within him. This wasn't just a physical force, it was something deeper, something that connected him to the world around him. It was the will to protect, the will to fight for what was right. The invader struggled to rise, its movements slow and pained. But John wasn't done. He focused again, and this time, he felt a surge of warmth flow from his heart, spreading through his body and into the energy he was controlling. With a final cry, the energy erupted once more, and the invader was sent crashing to the ground, completely overwhelmed by the force John had harnessed. For a moment, everything was silent. The other invaders froze, staring at their fallen comrade. The woman's voice rang out in the quiet, calm, and steady. "It's over," but the battle was far from finished. The remaining invaders growled, their eyes filled with fury, but they no longer had the arrogance they once did. John had shown them that they weren't invincible, that they could be challenged. They were no longer the unquestioned rulers they had once believed themselves to be. One of the invaders stepped forward, its eyes glowing even brighter than before. "You have no idea what you've done. You've only delayed the inevitable." The woman's eyes flared with renewed intensity. "Perhaps. But we will not go down without a fight. And we will never stop fighting. We will protect this world." John could feel the heat of the moment, the tension, the weight of what was at stake, but there was also something else. It was the certainty that they were not alone. He wasn't alone. Together, they could face anything. The invaders launched themselves forward, but John was ready. The power that had once felt foreign and dangerous was now part of him, part of his very being. And he would use it to protect everything he had come to care about. With a defiant roar, John channeled everything he had left, unleashing another wave of energy, sending the invaders reeling back. The war was far from over, but John had proven something today. He had proven that no matter how powerful the enemy, there was always hope. And with that hope, they would fight until the very end.